Get on the train before it leaves the station. The truth train is coming, gonna run them down.
Hello there, everybody. How you doing? We're here in the second in a series of videos regarding the evidence against Stephen Avery. And the idea in these videos is to come at the evidence with an even-handed approach. We're going to first look at it, the evidence. Today's piece of evidence is the RAV4, and pretty much, all things the RAV4. They were used at trial, right? and how things that were found with the RAV4, where it was found, and certain things were incriminating towards Stephen Avery. And then we're also going to look at when you scratch the surface on a lot of these pieces of evidence, that there's kind of some issues. And, we'll point some of these out here today. But to start, this starts really on, for the most part, the morning of November 5th, of 2005, when Pam Stern and her daughter get permission to search the Avery salvage yard. They go in, and in a very large yard, they found it fairly quickly. They found the RAV4 on the Avery salvage yard property. So, and that in itself, of course, is something that warrants attention, that will get noticed. The fact that the victim's vehicle was found on the property. Okay, so that's kind of one thing that kind of works against. So, upon more examination, DNA testing, and all various things, they end up finding in the RAV4 some of Stephen's blood up in the front cab area, and in one rear passenger door jamb. So they find some of Stephen's blood there. They find some of Teresa's blood in the cargo area. Okay, so they now have Stephen and the victim's blood in the same car. So that also looks like compelling evidence against Stephen Avery as well. And then you have also used at trial the DNA found on the hood latch of the RAV4. Okay, so it came back. The DNA came back to Stephen Avery. Just the sheer presence of his DNA there was an incriminating factor. You then have the fact that the key shows up in Stephen Avery's bedroom. Eventually, it shows up. Apparently, according to officers, it was somehow cleverly hidden in a cabinet. I will be posting a video below for you to check out an experiment that was done to see how plausible this cabinet story was. So you guys can check that out down below if you'd like. So the key is found in Stephen Avery's bedroom, and the key has Stephen Avery's DNA on it. So I'm going to show you that right now so that you can see Stephen Avery's DNA is on that key, and then we're going to come on back. This is Norm Gahn with direct examination of Sherry Culhane. And did you compare the profile that you developed from your swabbing of this key with the DNA profile that you developed from the buccal swab of Stephen Avery? Yes, I did, she says. And does this next slide correctly show your findings? Answer, yes, it does. And again, would you explain your findings to the jury? Answer, the same 15 markers. These are the types at each one of these markers, and you can see at every type, the type from the evidence or the profile from the evidence sample is consistent with the profile from Stephen Avery. And again, Ms. Culhane, the profile that you developed from item C, the key, is that what you would refer to as a full, complete DNA profile? And she says, yes. Okay, so you have Stephen Avery's DNA found on the key in his bedroom. This is, fairly, damning kind of thing to happen, right? Okay, fair enough. Ordinarily, I, obviously would agree. There's just a lot of things going on here beyond just what you see on the surface. And I agree that when you take these things like the RAV4 being found on the property, and you take these things like the bones being found in his burn pit, you guys have seen that already. You know the problems there, huge problems there. Then we're now going to go today through the problems with this evidence we see with the RAV4. The blood, the hood latch DNA, the key, all this. We're going to talk about a lot of these things, and just some other little things around the RAV4, such as Ryan Hillegas, and that sort of stuff. So, all right. So we now have gone through the evidence at trial that was essentially used. There was also some other stuff that I didn't touch on. Well, I didn't bring into this, but I'll touch on it. And that is the fact that there was blood stains on the interior of the cargo door that belonged to Teresa. The DNA matched Teresa Halbach. And the prosecution expert tried to claim that it was from when people were taking Teresa and throwing her into the back of the RAV4, and that it flung off of her hair and landed on the interior surface of the cargo door. And it can't be recreated. It's completely farcical. But what does recreate it pretty convincingly is somebody like using a hammer, and if they were bringing it back towards that interior surface, that drops would have been flying off of that whatever blunt type of instrument, basically, is what it's been determined. Leaves pretty much that precise size of drops, kind of in roughly the same similar type of a pattern, and that sort of thing. So we have, at trial, they used this blood pattern as, it came from blood being flung off of Teresa Halbach's blood-soaked hair as she was being thrown into the back of the cargo area of the RAV. It just doesn't wash. It doesn't work. But let's start from the beginning. We'll start with Pam Sturm finding the RAV4. Okay. First off, she shows up at the civilian search party, kind of headquarters thing where Ryan Hillegas is running the show. And she actually shows up and says, I want to go search the Avery property. And, and all that, and was a willing, participant to go do that. So they hand her a phone number for Sheriff Poggle and a camera. Ryan Hillegas does that. The camera belongs to Scott Bladorn. And so they hand her, like I said, a phone number for Sheriff Poggle and a camera. Okay, so they go over to Avery Salvage. And they ask Earl. He gives them permission to go and look and whatever. So they go in. And in this massive lot, in this huge, massive lot of cars, Pam pretty much almost walks straight to it. Pretty much almost straight to it. Now, it's just odd that she would just walk straight to it. But in another way, maybe it's not. Maybe it's not odd. Maybe if she just walked in the right direction, she was going to notice this RAV4 no matter what. Because, and this is where we're going to get to the point I'm going to make about the prosecution's claims that somebody tried to hide the RAV4. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you guys some things that I think make that claim rather ridiculous, and I think made this thing stick out like a sore thumb. And therefore, Pam Sturm didn't need the Lord's help or anyone else's to see the one thing on the yard that looked different than all the rest of the things. So, and we're going to go over that. It's the only car that's double parked up on the ridge where it's parked. And so I'm going to show you some pictures right now and show you this so you can understand it. Okay, so this is a picture of the RAV4 where it was parked, and you can see there's a red car next to it over there. That car is parked up against the berm, like the other cars you see kind of going behind it are all parked up against the berm. The RAV4 is actually double parked, and it has all of this stuff on it, and none of the other cars have that. So it kind of is one of the things that makes it stick out like a sore thumb, really. I mean, when I look at this, look at that hood and the pieces of wood and all that. I mean, it stands out because nothing else is like that. You can see it's double parked. And like I said, the RAV4 is right there. I mean, I'm surprised whoever put it there didn't put little landscape lighting to shine on that rear wheel there. So ultimately, I don't feel that it was well hidden, as some would claim. I feel it was made to be like a sore thumb, and then the RAV4 Toyota was prominently displayed so that it couldn't be. So, like I said, the RAV4 is less hidden than made to look like a sore thumb. And like I said, RAV4 Toyota is still prominently visible and on display. You know? And like I said, all that stuff on it, because no other car has that, and no other car is double parked up on that ridge. I mean, it just makes it stand out like a sore thumb. It's going to draw eyes. So, like I said, maybe Pam Sturm didn't need God. She just happened to walk in the right direction. And then saw something that looked different than everything else. And went in for closer inspection. So, but like I said, that thing was not hidden. And what doesn't make sense about that is that it doesn't make sense that Stephen Avery would attempt to hide it that way if in fact he'd done this, because he had just been running the car crusher that week. Would have been a much more effective way to get rid of and hide the car, the RAV. You know? I mean, especially since he was running it that week already, right? It just doesn't make sense, and like I said, it's just not well hidden. Anyways, you guys saw the pictures. You can make your own assessment, obviously. So, before we move on, we're going to come back to the leader of the civilian search party real quick. We're going to talk about Ryan Hillegas. I have another video. I'm going to post a link for it below that talks about Ryan Hillegas telling investigators that there was an insurance claim made by Teresa about the damage to the front driver's side turn signal that had been broken off and stuff. You guys see it in pictures of the cargo area. You'll see it in pictures there, and wedged in kind of like back at the back seat, basically where the back of the back seats are. And anyways, he tells investigators that there was an insurance claim made and that Teresa got a lump sum and just didn't repair it. Okay, there's no proof of that. This is Ryan Hillegas saying something that isn't true, and one of the ways we know that that's not true, if there was an insurance claim that could be produced, the investigators from Calumet County wouldn't have went and asked Michael Halbach if he had any pictures of the damage to the RAV4. That basically means they have no proof that there was any insurance claim, and by going and they ended up asking Michael Halbach when they reopened last year, or no, in 2017 they reopened the Halbach investigation, and one of the people they went and talked to was Mike to ask him for pictures of the RAV with that damage. So far as I know, they haven't surfaced, and I don't think they will, because I truly believe the RAV4 was damaged on its way in, being moved into the Avery salvage yard. It would explain a lot of things. It would explain why all the dogs, the scent dogs, cadaver dogs, and all of them, were all going out and were sniffing around the quarry and working out trails all around the quarry. They were started on Avery salvage, and I'm sure they intended the dogs to stay on Avery salvage, but the dogs, you know, the hounds, the bloodhounds, and everything, kept being drawn off of the Avery property and into the neighboring quarries. So that's, you know, interesting. So it adds more credit to the RAV4 being brought to the salvage yard. And it's you know, something that isn't that far out when you got a piece of evidence, powerful piece of evidence, that's got the blood in it, right? and you're able to roll it into place to incriminate somebody. I mean, we have reports of people seeing it elsewhere prior to November 5th when it was found at Avery Salvage. There are reports of this. So, you know, there's a great deal of confusion and suspect activity around the finding of the RAV. And like I said, it doesn't make sense that Stephen Avery himself put it there and tried to hide it in this way, because number one, it makes it stick out like a sore thumb, and number two, why would he leave the most identifying marker of the car perfectly visible? It just doesn't make sense. Anyway, all right. So from there we move on. I'll put, like I said, the link to the video where Ryan claims that an insurance claim was made. He tells Tom Fassbender all that. I'll leave that link below. So from there we move on to the fact that there was actually blood of Teresa's found in the cargo area and blood of Stephen's found up in the cab area. It is the theory of the prosecution that Stephen was actively bleeding from a cut on his finger. They believe that it happened that night. Anyway, they believe he's actively bleeding from it. And that's why he left a few drops up in the cab area and a one squiggle kind of near the ignition, but too far from the ignition to have been made by turning the key. So that's really odd. There's so many odd things about it, but it's a really, really tiny, tiny amount to begin with. So it's two drops in the passenger side rear door, basically. There's a squiggle by the ignition, but not really close enough. There's some on a CD case on the passenger seat. There's another spot on the carpet, I think on the driver's side, where they found flakes, blood flakes that came back to Stephen. I mean, who bleeds flakes? You know, and so anyway, and it's been proven that if you drop a blood on carpet, it doesn't turn into flakes. So anyway, so you got this really minute amount of blood, and then you have this blood in the back, which is Teresa's. Well, if the claim is that Stephen loaded Teresa Hallbach's body into the back of that cargo area, why do we not have Stephen's blood in the back of the cargo area? If he's dripping it up in the cab, why is he not dripping it in the cargo area? Because there is none of Stephen Avery's blood in the cargo area, right? So that's one of the other problems here. It's like, wait a second, how could this man have been actively bleeding and then not leave any blood while putting the victim into the back of the cargo area? And so that's where we see the, you know, one of the issues here, along with like the issue I just pointed out about the RAV4 not really being hidden but a sore thumb. Now with the blood, it's strange because it doesn't fit the narrative that the state is giving for this. It doesn't work. It's off. And because number one, like I said, if Teresa's bleeding like that, why is Stephen not getting her blood on him and then on up in the cab area when he's moving the RAV4 afterwards? I mean, she's clearly bleeding and she leaves a pretty significant amount of blood there in the cargo area. So if she's bleeding like that, how is if Stephen's leaving his own blood in the up in the cab, well, how is he not leaving any of hers up there? See, it's the no mixture and how the blood is separated that is so very odd, along with many other things, but this is just the first thing to point out. The other thing that I'm going to show you right now is that there was some blood found on the exterior of the tailgate of the RAV4, swabbed by Sherry Culhane at the crime lab when the RAV4 was brought to the crime lab, and it was labeled A23, and it was a male profile. Okay. Kratz, in his opening arguments, in his PowerPoint slideshow he had up on the board, had circled this blood stain and said Stephen Avery's blood on the tailgate, with like writing that said that, pointing to that circle. And so what I'm going to show you right now is Jerry Buting in his cross-examination of Sherry Culhane during trial, when he dispels that and points out that Mr. Kratz was misrepresenting the truth. So here we go. This is court testimony, questioning of Sherry Culhane, the DNA analyst in the Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey cases. That's the this is Jerry Buting questioning her, saying that's the item then that became A23. And that's just an evidence marker, A23. The answer is yes. And you tested that with a swab for DNA, right? Yes. And you did not find Mr. Avery's DNA on that swab, did you? No. And so, if Mr. Kratz in his opening statement told this jury with a PowerPoint slide right up here showing that with the circle around the rear door, and said that there would be evidence that Mr. Avery's DNA was on the door handle, that would be wrong, wouldn't it? Based on my results, I didn't find Stephen Avery's DNA on that sample. In fact, you found Mr. Avery's DNA nowhere on the rear of that vehicle at all, correct? To which Miss Sherry Culhane answers, correct. Okay, so that's talking about the blood evidence there. That's all the blood evidence that's really means anything that was used at trial. The next thing we're going to talk about now is the hood latch. The hood latch is a very, very, just quite an interesting thing you're going to see here. And it's quite extraordinary, the amount of DNA that was left on this hood latch, supposedly. Or at least that came in on the swab. And that's where this is tricky, because one of Zellner's experts, as you're going to see right here, offers an explanation for how this much DNA could have shown up when it can't be duplicated, of how this much DNA could show up, and he has a theory that would fit all of the facts and all of the that would fit everything in terms of this. So you're going to see right now one of Zellner's experts, DNA expert, explaining basically the problems with the hood latch DNA. Here we go. It is well documented that DNA was isolated from the listed item, and this DNA generated a DNA profile of the defendant. The process of obtaining a DNA profile from a biological sample includes an obligatory step to estimate the amount of recovered DNA. This step is called DNA quantification. The current method of DNA quantification uses a technique, quantitative PCR, or qPCR, a variant of the polymerase chain reaction. The documentation from the Wisconsin Department of Justice State Crime Laboratory, Madison, reveals that 1.9 nanograms of human DNA was recovered from the listed sample. At trial, it was claimed that the defendant's DNA on the listed item of evidence was deposited from sweaty fingers. This is, of course, pure speculation, as there is no forensic test for the presence of sweat. Nonetheless, the DNA that generated the profile came from somewhere. In an attempt to replicate the findings reported by the Wisconsin Department of Justice State Crime Laboratory, Madison, our laboratory performed a series of experiments on a vehicle identical to that impounded by law enforcement in this case. Volunteers were enlisted to open the car hood of this surrogate vehicle using the engine compartment hood latch, the latch that was then swabbed, and a quantity of DNA recovered estimated by qPCR, the current method used by the Wisconsin State Forensic DNA Laboratory, Madison. This experimental test was repeated 15 times. The hood latch was, of course, cleaned after each round in opening. In subsequent opening. The results of this test series is instructive. In 11 of the 15 replicates, no detectable DNA was recovered from the hood latch. In other words, the amount of DNA recovered after swabbing the hood latch used to open the vehicle was less than the minimum detection threshold of the qPCR method, less than 0.005 nanograms. In 4 of the replicates, quantifiable DNA was recovered with the following results: a 0.05 nanograms, a 0.09 nanograms. Hey, that one almost got to 0.1, 0.06 nanograms, and 0.07 nanograms, which is important because the crime lab claims they got 1.9 nanograms from it. So, in other words, in almost 3/4 of the hood opening trials, no measurable DNA was left behind by the individual who opened the hood. Put another way, even when DNA was left on the hood latch after opening the hood, the amount of DNA recovered was between 20 and 35 times less than that was recovered from the item identified as M05-2467 #ID, which is the swab of the hood latch. To put it yet another way, the Madison laboratory recovered from 6 to 7 times more DNA than all of the DNA recovered from all 15 hood openings combined. Given the experimental results and both the fact the body fluid detection data and the DNA recovery data from the hood latch opening trials, the question of what sample M05-2467 #ID really might be becomes a subject for investigation. Okay, this is Dr. Reich summing up what their testing was, basically what it boils down to. For a variety of reasons, the forensic evidence in Wisconsin versus Avery is being seriously scrutinized and re-examined. This includes the forensic DNA analysis conducted by the Wisconsin Department of Justice State Crime Laboratory, Madison. On item M05-2467 #ID, the data obtained from the body fluid identification testing, from DNA quantification, and from DNA profile, and from attempts at replicating the sample in question are contradictory. The data show an unacceptable DNA profile from a sample with no indication of a body fluid, a robust amount of DNA recovered from the sample, and yet attempts to replicate this finding failing repeatedly. These facts prompt a reevaluation of this evidence. The convenience of this explanation and the fact that it accounts for the physical findings observed from the analysis of item M05-2467 #ID does not prove evidence tampering, but more precisely evidence reassignment. But this hypothesis is a far better fit to the data, experimental trials, and need of the investigation for clear and convincing evidence of a link between the defendant and the victim's vehicle. A swab, truly taken from the engine compartment hood latch, should have been covered in black engine grime and grease, as anyone who has ever had to open a hood of a high-mileage vehicle can attest. The swab batting in question was merely very lightly discolored, another fact that does not fit with the claimed origin of this. To illustrate what he means, what a swab would look like after swabbing a hood latch on a high-mileage engine, I'm going to show you right now. Couple of supporters of Stephen and Brendan, some lovely ladies, one Allie Apperson, the other Marissa S. Actually did last year go out and take some swabs of their own hood latches, and you guys are going to see what those look like right now. So here we go. Here we have a swab taken by the lovely Marissa S. Last year from the hood latch of one of her vehicles. You can see there the black on it, pointing at it from the mouse. Again, the mouse here pointing at the very black because of the carbon buildup in the engine compartment. And these here are from Allie Apperson, who many of you know. And look, you can just see how dark black. It's not just slight discoloring. Alright, so hopefully that illustrates what's wrong with the swab. Okay, it shouldn't be just a slight yellowish or a slight or a light brownish coloration. Carbon is black. Black as night, black. You know, deep black. Yeah, anyways. Anybody that knows anything about carbon knows that. Anyway. So, now we're going to move on to the key. Okay. Key has numerous issues. Actually, before we move on to the key, we're going to talk about one other thing. The RAV4 was supposedly locked at the Avery salvage yard. Okay. When it was being moved from the salvage yard and taken to Madison, there is an unaccounted for 45 minutes where they stopped off. And it just so happens that when it got to the crime lab, one of the crime lab techs walked up to it and just pulled the driver's side door, and it was unlocked. Just an interesting tidbit for people to consider. All right, to move on. Now we're going to talk about the key to the RAV4. The key to the RAV4 was found in Stephen Avery's bedroom, and it was found by Link and Colburn. Okay. Colburn's claim is that he was searching through the cabinet and everything, and then he picked it up and was shaking it, and then suddenly the key just fell out of it. The back of the cabinet was separating from the side wall and stuff, and he says it just fell out. There's really numerous reasons why this is just bogus, but I want to show you right now, because I'm going to first of all direct you to a video I made about the cabinet. You can see the experiment in its entirety, and you can see how ridiculous it is. But one thing I want to illustrate is, because the state continues to say, oh yeah, they didn't find the key because all the searches before the 8th were just cursory searches, real quick ones. And it's just not true. I'm going to show you right now, because the configuration inside of this cabinet changes numerous times, and so their claims that there was no time to search this cabinet and blah blah blah, all these things they say are BS, because this cabinet, clearly the stuff inside of it changes numerous times. So I'm going to show you that right now. Here we go. Alright, so here we have the first picture of the cabinet. You can see there's keys there on the top shelf thing, and this is the way basically it was when they walked in, or within the first couple days. But here we see that there's, now a different configuration of everything in the shelving, and then it goes over to this time where we know, because Colburn told us that he pulled all this stuff out and put it back, and then that's when he tried shaking it. So we know all that stuff's been rearranged. So we know it was gone through at least twice, and that nobody seemed to see. Okay, so look, it's basically bull when they say all the previous searches were cursory searches, and that's why that didn't get looked into. No, it clearly got looked into. The configuration of the things in that cabinet changes, so that means people were going through it. Officers, investigators, those sort of people were going through it. So their claims that they couldn't have gone through it prior to the 8th because all those were cursory searches is just not. Their own pictures prove that that's BS. All right. Okay, now we're going to go on to, I'm going to show you an actual picture of the key and just show you some of the things about it on its face, just on the surface, just from observation that you can look at on this key that are a little bit strange. Alright, here we go. Alright, so this is the key, and as you can see, this key, it looks, it doesn't look very used. You see the machine marks, like from the grinder, are still prominent. You don't see brass showing really on any of the edges like you would with a normal kind of key. It just doesn't really look like a key that got used a lot, like if it was a key that got used every day for a significant amount of time, because like I said, eventually the silver or whatever kind of rubs off and you see the brass. There's like a brass underneath, and you begin to see that on the little corners and edges, and you're not seeing that anywhere on this key, and I've always found that to be interesting as well. Okay, and this brings me to the last thing that I'm going to say about the key for now, tonight, with this video. Today, I should say, I guess, maybe. But in this video, last thing I'm going to say and bring up about this key is whose DNA wasn't on it. And once again, this is Jerry Buting, cross-examining Sherry Culhane. Okay, now you have found no mixture of DNA on that key, right? And they're talking about the RAV4 key, to which she says, right. You did not find any DNA of Teresa Halbach on that key, did you? That's correct. A car key that presumably she handled and used daily, right? Correct, she answers. So, it's very odd that Stephen Avery's DNA is on this key, but not a trace of the DNA of the person who supposedly used this key every day for a considerable amount of time. Alright, so it's very bizarre to me that we do not have any of Teresa's DNA on that key. Just doesn't make sense. You know? And if Stephen Avery's cleaning the key, why is he then going to be depositing his DNA back on it? I mean, that would be like, again, basically, why bother cleaning it in the first place if they're going to do that? I mean, so it's just a bizarre thing. And there's so many bizarre things, but there you go. None of Teresa's DNA on her own car key. Just like there's none of her DNA anywhere in that trailer. Just like there's none of her DNA anywhere in the garage. You know what I mean? There's just no trace of her at Avery Salvage, other than the 2/5 of the cremains that they recovered from Stephen Avery's burn pit. 2/5. You know? So it's just bizarre. You know? And this key is, I mean, Colburn's claims of how he found it, or how it came out of the dresser or out of the cabinet and whatever, are bizarre. I call it his discovery of Narnia, because that's really how ridiculous it is to me that he makes these claims. And hopefully you guys will go over and watch the cabinet video. Like I said, I'll be leaving a link for it down below. One of the final things I want to touch on is something that a lot of people talk about, and I do feel there is potentially possibly some significance in this. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about the bone I have to pick with this issue, and it's the RAV4 color. Okay? There are many people out there who believe that the RAV4 found on the salvage yard wasn't actually the one Teresa had or owned. I'm not going to go too much into that. My issue as to why, the door is open for this speculation is because when you look at the missing persons flyer for Teresa, it says a green RAV4. When you see it on the news, it's a green RAV4. Green, green, green. If you look at the Wisconsin State Automobile Registry for that RAV4, it's green. Green, 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 green. Suddenly when it's found, it's blue. And a lot of people have said it's the lighting and those kinds of, in that kind of paint, it can kind of change color and different kind of lighting and whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that can happen. That can. It totally can happen. But here's my issue, ultimately. And I don't know if there's anything to this or not, but ultimately, my issue is if in fact this was an issue that this car had, that it sometimes looked blue in certain light, right? Why isn't that on the missing persons flyer? Why aren't you giving yourself as much of an opportunity as possible to find your loved one? That's, to me, the weird thing. The point is that there's like some, strangeness around that, and although I believe it maybe possibly could just be explained with the type of paint, it's like I said, I'm ultimately concerned that, okay, if that was the case and this car's paint did actually do that, then why is it nobody indicated that on the missing persons flyer, that green but may sometimes appear blue, right? If this was a known thing that would happen. And so that's just, for me, that's the one thing when I look at the RAV4, and the color issue, and whether or not it may have been swapped, and all these things that a lot of people say. Like I said, the door's open for that speculation because of the reason I just stated. So there's a lot of things about the RAV4. If you want to find out more about it, you can go on Reddit. A gentleman named Henbury there has done quite a few analyses of things about the RAV4. He's gone into pretty deep depth and looked and dug up some very interesting information regarding the RAV4. So go check Henbury out on Reddit. I'll try to leave you a link down below. Also, You might want to go check out Millbilly Jeebs on YouTube. He's done a lot of videos regarding the RAV4, so if you want to go check out more about the RAV4, you can go over to Millbilly Jeebs' channel and check that out. I'll leave a link to his channel down below as well. Like I said, the whole point of these videos is to really just offer it. Look, here's the evidence, and yes, this is why it looks bad and it incriminates Steven Avery. But when you look at this evidence a little bit closer and scratch the surface on this evidence just a little bit, you begin to discover that it doesn't look right, and there's like some serious questions as to how it ended up where it is, or why it is what it is. I mean, there's just a lot of questions that creep in. Why is Teresa's DNA not on her own car key? How is this key missed for several days and then finally found on the 8th by Link and Colburn, two people deposed in Steven Avery's civil suit from 1985? You know, it's just on and on it goes. There's just so much that doesn't wash. And with the RAV4, it's like I've always said, it's a piece of evidence that was on wheels, and so all that had to be done is it just had to be rolled into place. And like I say, the way they put it up, it's up on a ridge, kind of above this pond, and you saw the way that most of the cars were parked up against the berm, right, and lined up along the berm. And the RAV4 was the only one that was double parked next to that red car that was parked next to the berm. The RAV4 was parked next to that red car, and then all those things were stacked all over it and made it stick out like a sore thumb. All except for the big thing on the back of the wheel, the spare tire with the cover that said RAV4 Toyota, and announced, you know, what it was and what was there. I mean, it's not cleverly hidden. It's not remotely hidden. It is made to stick out like a sore thumb. And I'm sorry, there's a problem, and the main problem with that is that is not hiding it, especially when you consider Steven was running the car crusher that week. It doesn't make sense. If he had done this, he would have, especially since he was already running the car crusher, would have more effectively gotten rid of the evidence if he had actually done this. But I think the fact that you have the broken light on it, and all the fact that the dogs were all interested in what was going on in the quarries, and they didn't seem to be very interested at all in what was going on Avery Salvage, other than the path that the RAV4 most likely took to get in to Avery Salvage. That's, you know, otherwise they were jumping the berm and heading into the quarry and following trails around the quarry. So I mean, it's more than significant to me to find out that the dogs were not interested in Avery Salvage, but were very much interested in the quarries. And even law enforcement was interested in some stuff over on Cuss Road. And I think in part of the next video, where I'm going to be talking about the bullet, I'm going to go ahead and incorporate a little bit more of the bones, or at least the burn barrels. And I'm going to share with something that was found by Wrecking Crew member Moving On 04. You guys may have seen it over on Rubber Ducky's channel. But we're going to talk about potentially a burn barrel from the deer camp being substituted as one of Steven Avery's, and some of the documents, pictures, and markings on barrels that kind of back up this theory. So I may go ahead and cover that a little bit when I'm talking about the magic bullet in the next video. So hope you guys found this one interesting about the RAV4. Go check out those people I told you to check out. Check out the links below to the other videos about the cabinet, about Ryan and the insurance claim, and some of my videos there that I did about 2 years ago about the color of the RAV4. And remember to check, so check out those links, and I'll also have the links to some of the ones that I did about the color and the potential swapping of the RAV4 that was a theory, you know, back then. And so about 2 years ago I made those. I'll go ahead and leave the links for you guys to check those out. And like I said, there are other YouTubers and stuff out there talking about the RAV4 and digging things up about the RAV4. So if you're interested, be sure to go check them out. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see you.